Hello, everyone. My name is Celine Oliveri, and I work as a biologist at Caltrans District 7. I'm currently the leading biologist for the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing project right now, but I'm also working on the wildlife passage modifications on State Route 118. So I wanted to share this project with you guys. So just to give you a little bit of background information, existing highways act as barriers to wildlife and their movement, and as a result have caused habitat loss and fragmentation and reduced population size, as well as reduced population persistence and genetic diversity for various wildlife species. Wildlife vehicle collisions are an aspect of highways which can affect species directly via mortality, or indirectly through the prevention of reaching necessary resources such as foods, mates, territory, etc. And Caltrans District 7 is attempting to remedy the effects of the highways by improving key undercrossings for wildlife movement in various routes. So the project that I'm going to talk to you about today is the 118 in Ventura County. And currently the 118 is one of the largest obstacles affecting movement of wildlife within the critical linkage, which is called the Santa Monica Sierra Madre connection, that acts as a barrier for wildlife vehicle collisions, or WVCs. So why is this important to Caltrans? It's important because sustainability is a central element of Caltrans' mission now. Sustainability involves stewardship that improves the safety, health, and quality of life for workers, travelers, and communities. So we are trying to reduce vehicle wildlife collisions within our facilities. And also environmental sustainability entails complying with legal mandates, and that includes being proactive about our stewardship decisions and focusing on ecosystem preservation, as well as climate change adaptation and mitigation. This leads to sustainable planning for our corridors. So the purpose of the project was to help minimize the obstacles that are affecting wildlife movement within the Santa Monica and Sierra Madre connection by increasing connectivity for all wildlife within the region. So we actually, for this project, we focused on 5 locations, and this is through a study that we did with National Park Service. We hired them to do a wildlife movement study in the area just to see what was going on, are animals crossing, what are the mortality rates, etc. So just to put this in a regulatory context, there are laws and regulations which require, I wouldn't say, to a point, yes, require that we do our best to avoid and minimize impacts to threatened and endangered species. And in order to do this, we need to conduct surveys and write reports regarding wildlife movement in the area, just to see which areas can be improved so we could help minimize impacts. So as you can see, there's both state and federal laws and regulations that help support wildlife movement. So when Caltrans is assessing wildlife movement, they look at the route deficiencies and existing assets, so culverts and bridges in the area. They look at key natural resources. So they look at whether or not our facilities are located in wildlife habitat corridors, if there's high connectivity or the possibility of high connectivity, and if it's adjacent to conservation areas. And those areas are a higher priority because if we improve those, then we could get a higher rate of wildlife movement. We also pay attention to things such as land use values, so regional conservation plans, zoning, and land ownership. So this helps to create an integrated and informed wildlife corridor concept from Caltrans. So this is a picture of the Santa Monica Sierra Madre connection. These are critical, the areas outlined in yellow are the critical linkages. Our project, the 118, is located, well, this portion of the 118 that we did the study is located further west from where the critical linkage is, but just because it's not within that area doesn't mean it's not important. We still need to get wildlife moving within these areas so that they could reach the critical linkage areas. So we did our study with National Park Service, and Caltrans, in collaboration with National Park Service, they studied the wildlife movement and mortality from the city of Moore Park west to Santa Clara Avenue. And the study took place between March 2011 and January 2013. And the way we were able to get funding for that was through a state planning and researching grant. So we measured highway mortality. We set up wildlife cameras. National Park Service, they put radio collars on various species so that they were able to track them. And the goal of the study was to measure wildlife mortality from vehicles. So this would help NPS to evaluate the use of existing road crossing points and identify future projects that may affect animals' ability to cross, as well as determine potential measures to improve the crossing points that currently exist. Yeah, so if we were to improve these crossing points, then it would help to increase habitat connectivity and permeability for native wildlife across the 118. So this is important for both wildlife as well as motorists because, you know, then the traveling public would be able to avoid getting to car accidents with wildlife. So this is an example of the data that was collected by National Park Service. To the left, you have coyote movements, and you could kind of see some of the lines going up to the road and then going back and them not really crossing, but you could also see the areas where they're mostly crossing, which is by Somis Road. And then on the right, you have bobcat movement, and it's the same idea. It's just to see, you know, the areas that they're crossing most so we could see what's high priority within our facilities. This is mountain lion movement. So this shows the various mountain lions territories. So they were tracking P21 as well as P16. And it shows like areas that they were living in for most of the study. So our project on the 118 is just southwest of where the mountain lion ranges were for both mountain lions. So study with National Park Service also showed the number of roadkills that were found per month. And so it shows each column shows, you know, each month, and every row shows a different species. And then it shows the total amount of roadkills, and that was 509 throughout the project study. This includes chickens, dogs, rabbits, raccoons, all of the species you see listed on the left-hand side of the table. So that's a lot of roadkill for 1 year within such a small portion of the roadway. This is also showing the amount of roadkill that National Park Service observed, and it's broken down by species. So it was mostly rodents and rabbits, which were getting the roadkill in this study. So these are the results that National Park Services or National Park Service came up with. 3 of the underpasses, Mexico Creek, North Street, and La Cumbre, accounted for 97% of documented crossings. Bobcats rarely cross the 118, except in the vicinity of Mexico Creek, which was the best crossing point. Rabbits accounted for 45% of all of the animals found as WVC mortalities. On average, there was 1.35 animals killed per day as a result of wildlife vehicle collisions. The National Park Service documented a total of 13 species crossing along that portion of the 118. And several of the underpasses that they had monitored had walls that prevented wildlife from using them to cross. So they concluded that if the pre-existing culverts were of an appropriate size in the areas that they monitored, that wildlife would be able to use them, and that they usually try and find a way to use them as opposed to just crossing over the surface road. So that's a picture of a bobcat at North Street trying to go to the underpass. Luckily, they know how to jump pretty high. Not all of the animals have the capability to do that. So here are some more results, but in the form of photographs. So on the left, possum is trying to climb a wall at the Lacumbre underpass, but he was unsuccessful and he had to turn around. And then to the right, you have a bobcat jumping on the wall from the north side, and they were able to jump the wall successfully. To the left, you have raccoons climbing up a ladder at Long Canyon, and not all animals are capable of doing that. So we had to make modifications at this location. And then this one picture on the right is Mexico Creek, and it just shows a collared bobcat walking through the underpass. So this was the location that had the 97% of the wildlife use. This was the top priority wildlife crossing. So we ranked the culverts by going out with the Federal Highway Administration. They took a look at the culverts with us and National Park Service, and we took things into consideration like the vegetative cover present within 50 meters of the culvert or the crossing, stream width, connectivity to large natural areas, wildlife detection rate, number of roadkill within 500 meters. And we also tried to come up with some cost estimates to see how much it would cost to modify each of these locations. So there was originally 7 locations that were analyzed, but due to funding restrictions, we were able to modify 5 of them, and we had to prioritize which ones we were able to modify. So as you can see, the project area I have highlighted in red, and also the culverts that were modified was North Street, Long Canyon, Lacumbre, Wailing Siren, and then Mexico Creek. And I know I had said that previously that Mexico Creek was the most important area for wildlife crossing, but since there were not as many impediments at that area, it was moved to the bottom for priorities as far as having to make modifications, because it was a pretty good crossing already. So the modifications that were needed were pretty minor. So Caltrans that looks at different mitigation goals and options. So Caltrans goals are, of course, increased public safety, reduction in animal vehicle collisions, increase in connectivity for habitat, and reduction in habitat fragmentation, as well as increased genetic exchange of local wildlife. And so our options include either improving the existing structure, modifying it, or adding a completely new crossing structure. And all of those have different costs. So we have to look at each crossing point to see what would be the best decision for that area. So also Caltrans has best design practices and wildlife enhancements. And so we try our best to incorporate best practices and maintenance measures such as keeping culverts clear so that there's the sight distance through the culverts is optimal for wildlife. We try and retrofit existing culverts to benefit aquatic and terrestrial passage. And we tried to use fencing so we could funnel wildlife to areas that are not as dangerous as where they're currently trying to cross. We also tried to make some of the crossings more of a natural substrate, so they're more willing to use them, and replace steep slopes with natural 2-to-1 slopes. We can't have the slopes be super steep because then some of the wildlife will not want to use them. So this is the estimate that we came up with FHWA. And the first one includes all 7 of the sites. And as you can see, that is a total of $1 million+ dollars. And then the cost at the bottom, or the cost estimate at the bottom, includes or excludes Donlin, which was the most expensive wildlife crossing to improve. So we did not get to improve that one, but we improved the others. And there's a huge difference in the price. So National Park Service, when they did their study, concluded that fencing should be installed along 118 from so that they don't cross, or so that wildlife doesn't cross the road directly. It'll funnel the wildlife, and that ramps would allow wildlife to scale the high ledges under culverts. So we then applied for an EEMP grant through the California Natural Resources Agency. And the grant amount was for $349,600. And we set aside $18,000 for a post-construction study for National Park Service, so they could see the difference between the mortality rates before and after the modifications take place, just to see, how effective they actually are. So these are the sites: North Street, La Cumbre, Long Canyon, Wailing Siren, and Mexico Creek. And it included the installation of fencing at Mexico Creek as well as Long Canyon. And it also included construction of riprap, concrete, and steel ramps, which allowed wildlife to scale high ledges under the culverts. And then the year-long post-construction study was conducted, and it was the same type of monitoring as the pre-construction, which included wildlife mortality monitoring, monitoring by using cameras, and then collaring also. And then they're currently working on providing us with the final monitoring report. So we have some of the data, but not all yet. But so far, we've got a good amount of information that I'll share with you in a bit. So these are plans for the improvements that took place. The chain link fences were 10 feet high. So that included 2 feet of fencing with tension wire at the bottom to go underground so that wildlife couldn't dig underneath the fencing. And this fencing was placed at Long Canyon and Mexico Creek. And then we had the ramps, the riprap ramp at North Street, the concrete ramp at Long Canyon, and the steel ramps at Wailing Siren and La Cumbre. So these are plans. The red lines show you where the fencing was installed. And once again, the fencing is used to funnel the wildlife through the culverts and avoid the roads. So this is Mexico Creek before. You could see just metal beam guardrail along the road. There's no fencing really funneling animals. Even though there's a lot of wildlife use in this area, it's just safer to funnel them because, as you can see, the left-hand picture, there's a roadkill in the area. And this is Mexico Creek after, and this is the fencing that was installed. You could see the fencing leading up to the corner of the undercrossing, so that we make sure there's no holes so that wildlife can't get through the small cracks or anything like that. And it successfully helps funnel wildlife in this area. Then we have Wailing Siren, and this is on the north side of the culvert. There's about a 12 to 15 foot drop. And then, so that's the very left-hand picture showing the upstream part of the culvert. And then on the downstream, on the outlet, there's a pretty big drop also. So that's my two the pictures of showing my two co-workers, measuring the distance that the ramp would be once we install it. So next, this is Wailing Siren after. So we did a steel ramp at this area, and we also did modified the steel ramps by putting wooden slats across the ramp just to make it easier for wildlife to cross on and grip onto. We also included stenciling, just basically telling the public that the ramp is intended for wildlife use only. Please don't cross the ramp, strictly for wildlife. So, so far so good. Long Canyon, this is another location. This one had a pretty massive drop. As you can see on the right-hand side, it's about 10 feet drop. So it was really important for us to modify this location. And then this is a location I was showing you earlier that had the raccoons climbing up the ladders. So this is Long Canyon after, and it shows the fencing to help funnel and the massive concrete ramp, which helps wildlife cross. We also did stenciling at this location so people wouldn't use it to cross and just leave it for wildlife. This is La Cumbre. I mean, it's not a big drop, but it's still a barrier. So we did this picture is showing a raccoon trying to go over the wall, and the raccoon finally does make it, but not all species are able to jump this wall, especially the smaller guys. So we made improvements to this one, which included a steel ramp also and the wooden slats. And we also did a stencil for the public, just letting them know that this is specifically for wildlife. We did it in both English and in Spanish. And we were pleasantly surprised to see that there was a bear in the area. I didn't know that there were actually bears in this area because it's primarily agricultural. I just didn't know that they existed there. So when National Park Service showed me this picture, I got really excited. I think it's awesome that it was using the ramp. So this is North Street, and this is the final location. As you can see in the right-hand photo, it used to consist of just kind of like ponded, stagnant water, and no wildlife was really using it to cross. Not no wildlife, some was, but it was not very easily accessible. So we made the modifications and put riprap within the ponded area, and you could see raccoons using it as well as coyotes. So that one was pretty successful also. And I just wanted to show you some pictures from the National Park Service wildlife cameras. There had been some mountain lions near some of the ramps, coyotes, raccoons. There's even little baby possums on their mama trying to cross the ramps. So we have a pretty large array of species using the wildlife ramps. Here's some more pictures. Bobcat right here. So it's pretty exciting. And then we have a badger, more mountain lion pictures. It's pretty cool stuff. So National Park Service is doing where they're putting together the data that they've collected for the post-construction study. And so far, there's been a total of 88 wildlife mortalities within the project area, which is, you know, a fifth of what was showing up pre-construction. So that's an improvement. So basically the results that we have so far is that there's reduced animal vehicle collisions and increased safety due to these wildlife ramps. I don't have the specific statistics to give to you right now because the project report is still being completed. But the fact that there was no crossings at some of these locations and now there are crossings is great. It's a huge improvement. Also, I'd like to note that this project was awarded the 2020 SCAG Sustainability Award for Green Region and Resource Conservation and Climate Action. So the next steps for Caltrans are the famous Liberty Canyon / Wallace Annenberg Wildlife Crossing project. So we're currently working on that. That is our main priority. And we're super excited to be a part of it. On the other hand, we have another project coming up, which is the Rocky Peak project. And this is further east from where the previous 118 project took place. And it's going to be the same type of thing that's going to happen. They're going to do pre-construction monitoring to see which locations are high priority or getting the most mortalities. So then Caltrans can, you know, in the future, make an informed decision on where best to place the wildlife crossings when we do have a chance to make improvements. So the study will also include wildlife cameras, GPS collars, and roadkill surveys. And we were able to get funding for Rocky Peak through the Planning Special Studies Program, the SPR grant, once again. So that's my talk on Caltrans and other wildlife crossing projects. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And yeah. Hope you enjoy P22 Day. Here are my references if you are interested in looking up information on wildlife crossing. Thank you very much for letting me share my presentation with you.